Duh.
Hello everyone, I'm K-Swope, and in today's installment of K-Swope versus the MCU, in which I'm reviewing every MCU film building up to Avengers Doomsday, we're reviewing Ant-Man, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm really excited for that. Here's how this review is going to work. We're going to talk about the good things I found about the movie, the bad things I found about the movie, and then at the end we're going to give it a rating on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being similar in quality to stepping on a Lego brick, and 10 being the Citizen Kane of superhero films. Jumping right into things, the good section. D-Agent Michael Douglas looks fantastic in this film. A lot of credit to that. I think the whatever methods they used for that were absolutely fantastic. So a lot of credit to that. He looks fantastic. If you know what I'm talking about, there's a scene at the beginning of the film in which we see Hank Pym, and he's a lot younger, okay? This is like, I forget when it's time-stamped, but much earlier in the timeline. Also got to note, my boy Howie Stark is back. Howard Stark, he appears in this film also as well in that same scene, so I figured got to mention that out. That puts the Howard Stark counter up another notch. And while we're talking about characters in the film, specifically Luis, guys, Luis is a gem. He is an icon. Everybody loves Luis. He does a lot of stuff in this film. I don't think he doesn't really shine as much outside of this film, to be quite honest. They kind of have a forced scene with him in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but like his super elaborate storytelling, we don't really see all that much outside of this film and that film, which is a real shame because Luis is a very fun character. Also got to throw out there too, an actor makes, I don't know if this is really a cameo because it's not really like they intentionally hired this guy to make a cameo or whatever, but Johnny Pemberton shows up in this. If you don't know who that is, maybe you're more familiar with Thaddeus from Fallout. He is the guy who tries to go to Baskin Robbins to order some hot food, and Scott Lang's like, dude, really? He's that guy. And so that's really fun to see. And so he's actually been in a lot of stuff, honestly, like the 21 Jump Street movies. He was in those and things like that. And it's not until, I guess, more recently with Fallout where he's beginning to make a bit of a name for himself. So that's really funny seeing him in here. Very good to see. Speaking of funny stuff, though, too, the humor in this film is also, I think, balanced quite well, for the most part, at least. There's a lot of really good scenes that are funny, and they can afford to be. And so I very much like that, especially when you got stuff like Thomas the Tank Engine being thrown around, then accidentally made giant and crashing through a wall. Like, that's pretty funny stuff, you gotta admit. There's also the scene when they're in a briefcase and they're flying around and he accidentally pushes the Siri button on a phone in the briefcase and it starts playing music. Like, that's pretty funny. This film also deserves a lot of credit because they actually made Ant-Man cool, because Ant-Man was, in a way, kind of sort of like the Aquaman of Marvel, if that makes sense. When I say Aquaman, I mean the butt of jokes. You guys know, like, the Deep from The Boys, right? That's how most people kind of see Aquaman. He's kind of lame, pathetic. They've done a lot to try to rectify that, but at the end of the day, I mean, you talk to fish and you dress like that. I mean, not a whole lot of fun. Ant-Man's not a whole lot better. This film actually made the character and the concept very cool by actually highlighting, I think, the actual usefulness of his powers and abilities. So that's really cool. A lot of credit goes to that. Also, just a quick mention, I gotta say this, Cassie Lang, adorable, okay? She is hilarious in this movie, and she's one of my favorite characters. Anyways, I've talked so much about sizzle so far. Let's talk about some real meat and potatoes of the film, why I like it, what the good things about it. And here's kind of the thing. So I always talk about the best superhero movies take another superhero genre and they kind of do a genre bend where they take that and they apply superheroes to it. And this film, honestly, is the case in point, I think, for that, because it is a heist film through and through. And so you basically have them pulling off this like Ocean's 11 style heist where they're trying to bust in to destroy the Pym particles that they recreated in the Yellow Jacket suit so that it cannot go into the wrong hands, okay? Because that would be catastrophic for a lot of people all around the world. So they're trying to do that, and it follows a very similar formula where there's a few, snags they hit and a few detours they have to take in order to get everything set up for the big grand heist at the end. And that is really cool, and so I very much enjoyed that element of this film. And to be fair, this might just be the first heist film I think I've maybe ever fully watched. So again, gotta give credit where it belongs, and so I really enjoy seeing that. And again, this is case in point for exactly what I mean when I say the best superhero films are genre bends, where they apply another genre, okay? And speaking of detours that they take in this film too, they have to fight Falcon, which is cool because they go and without knowing, they have to raid the Avengers compound, and they're like, oh crap, but we're already here, so what can we do? And so Scott Lang then ends up fighting with Falcon, and he wins, and it's very embarrassing for Falcon. But either way, my boy Falcon, Anthony Mackie, this is actually, he's been in, with the exception of Guardians of the Galaxy, every single Marvel film since his debut in Winter Soldier, to be quite honest. So that's really interesting if you sit and think about it. And also, if you sit and think about it, he's also going to be in the next film we're reviewing, because we are actually wrapping up Phase 2 today, guys, which is pretty crazy to say. Beginning Phase 3 with Captain America Civil War. So, we're talking about that in a little bit, but in the meantime, we got this going on. Ant-Man, really, really good to see. More about Civil War in a minute, by the way, because this ties into that quite a lot. I was going to say, I think this film has some of the best fun fight set pieces, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that they're fighting on a micro scale. So, as I mentioned before, they have a big fight on a train table where they're throwing a, like, Thomas the Tank Engine toy around, which is really funny. They also have that briefcase fight I mentioned before, and being able to do that is really, really neat. There's a whole scene where Scott Lang shrinks for the first time. He's in a bathtub, washes down the sink, busts through some pipes, and he's going through his entire apartment building with different houses and stuff, just trying to avoid everyday dangers, and it is absolutely awesome and really, really cool. It makes for some really great spectacle. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the good of this film. Kind of short and sweet, I feel like, today with the good. But let's move into the bad section. For one, I mentioned I love the de-aging of Michael Douglas in this film. However, the problem comes in everywhere else, because I think the CGI is kind of subpar in this film, to be quite honest. It's not abysmal and terrible, but there are certain scenes, I just mentioned the scene where he's going through the apartment complex and everything like that, where I'm just like, this looks CGI. Like, I'm not at all convinced that this is at all real. And I think that's the problem, is when you strip it away and you're looking at it in isolation, does this look real? Because it does not look real to me. And so that's the problem. That's where I kind of cross the bounds. And we've had that stuff show up in some other movies here and there, but I think most of Phase 1, at least, the CGI was pretty fantastic and pretty stellar, that it was a lot harder to tell. There were certain shots, like, yeah, okay, I can tell that that's definitely not real, but we're beginning to lose the edge on CGI with this film, and it is a real shame. Also, there's an emotional point in this, too, that really just didn't land for me, and that, of course, was Antony's death, because he legitimately, they shoot an ant with a bullet, okay, which is insane for one, especially because he's a flying ant, and he dies and stuff, and it's like, oh, tragic, but I'm like, guys, it's an ant. Hank Pym kind of knew that. That's why he did not give any of the ants specific names or grow, attachments to them, because it's like, they're ants, they're gonna die at some point, so why get super attached? And I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm like, dude, it's an ant. I know you like this ant, but it didn't do anything for me emotionally. I think it did for a lot of people. I'm not one of those people.
Ant boot.
I also think with this film, they have a very similar humor problem that I mentioned before in my Avengers Age of Ultron review, which is that they keep breaking up the more serious, intense moments to make jokes. And as a result, that makes the film feel a lot less emotionally in-depth and impactful, and that is a real, real shame. Because, if you didn't think about it, you watch the final battle of this film, and you cut out all the jokes, it's pretty high octane. You're like, whoa, this is really going. And then, the finale happens, all the stuff. But it's like every 2 or 3 minutes in the final battle, something jokey happens. And it's usually just it's almost like a Family Guy cutaway in a way, if you didn't think about it, because oftentimes it's just showing the scale of what's happening to the guys fighting and seeing how tiny it really is, it is funny. And I do think we need at least one of those jokes in this film, because that would just really make the whole thing. But they just kind of keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and I'm just like, bro, I've seen this already. Like, can we just, make like the All-American Rejects and move along now? But that is also going to wrap up the bad section. I do have a lot of notes, though, I need to talk about with this film. For one, this film is the first reference we have at all to Spider-Man in the MCU, which is also awesome because we're going to see his MCU debut, that rhymes, in the next film, again, Captain America Civil War. Looking forward to reviewing that. And this film really ends in a place that is really leading things into Civil War, because we find out from another one of Luis's big monologues that Falcon is actively looking for Scott Lang after their fight, because he wants to recruit him for Team Cap in that movie. And so that's really cool. They don't really say what that's about, but you find out what that's about in the next installment, and so that's really cool. Also got to say too, Ant-Man movie as an idea, but without Hank Pym being Ant-Man, is sort of a weird concept, because I always associate Ant-Man as a character with Hank Pym first. Okay, Scott Lang's kind of like, oh yeah, he's that other Ant-Man guy. So it's kind of a weird choice, in my opinion, that they make Scott Lang the main Ant-Man. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I don't know. I feel like if I was a hardcore Ant-Man fan, which I don't know if there's any hardcore Ant-Man fans out there. I mean, if there are, holla at me, because I'd like to know that you exist. But if there were, and I was one, I would prefer, I think, to see a first Ant-Man film about Hank Pym and less Scott Lang. But it might be cool at some point to do sort of like a Hank Pym prequel, because we see that he, was Ant-Man. That is very apparent. We don't get to see much of that, just a few glimpses into what that looked like. Maybe it'd be cool if we had a prequel that kind of showed us what Hank Pym as Ant-Man got up to. And so that would be really, really cool, just seeing one plot that maybe led into the events of Janet Van Dyne disappearing and going into the quantum realm and all that stuff. That would be cool, I think. But last and certainly not least, my final note is this. So, the bad guy in this film, okay, he's Yellow Jacket, but his name is Darren Cross, okay? And I swear, I get this name confused with two other people. I get him confused with Darren Criss, okay? He was the guy from Glee. He also played the Music Meister in the musical crossover episode of The Flash and Supergirl. And then also David Cross, who is Ian Hawke.
Told you, Dave. Never lose.
Loser.
I'm like, bro, why do these three people have to have such similar names? It drives me insane. But that's just a note I wanted to point out. I thought it was kind of funny. Hopefully you guys did as well. And anyways, I know this review felt kind of short, but then again, this is Ant-Man. Let's go from 1 to 10. What did I think of it? To be honest, okay, this is a film that I've always had really high regard for. And after going back and rewatching it, I realized, you know, it's still a really good film, but I don't like it as much as I initially thought I did. So after revisiting it, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10 today, ladies and gentlemen. And that's going to wrap things up, not only for Ant-Man, but also for Phase 2 of K-Swope versus the MCU. Tune in. We are about to dive into Captain America Civil War here shortly. So I'm really excited for that. That is another really, really big moment for the MCU and the story being told throughout the entire Infinity Saga. So I hope you guys are ready for it. I know I sure am, and I am very much looking forward to seeing how things end up when we get into Phase 3 and we end things at Avengers Endgame. But hey, that's what I thought of Ant-Man. Let me know what you guys think of Ant-Man down below in the comments. Love to hear what you think. Gonna wrap things up for me. Don't forget that Jesus loves you, and I will see you in the next one.